Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Adult Chair on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and I am here once again with Michelle Chalfant.
Hi, Pete.
How are you?
I'm great. I just had company for 3 days. It was fantastic.
Wow. Well, that's because it was 3 days. Isn't that how it goes? Had they stayed for the fourth, you would have hated them?
No, these are my favorite people, like family people. My two cousins and my sister and... Yeah, and my cousin from Rochester, we hadn't seen in a long time, so he came in from out of town, and then my sister and my other female cousin came in, and we all grew up together, so we had a ball. It was a little mini reunion in Nashville, Tennessee for us. It was really
awesome.
Fun. Yeah.
I feel like, probably listen to John Denver tunes.
We did one night.
I nailed it. Oh, I love it.
It was really funny because we went to some of the live music in the bars and restaurants downtown, and nobody likes country music, unfortunately. We tried. We went from one place to the next. They'd play like really a great rock and roll song, and then they'd go into country. We go, time to go. So we had to go to like 6 different bars, and we finally just came home.
It's because every bar you go to, it's remixes of Amy Grant songs, right?
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear that these things are rejuvenating for you, mostly because we are talking about, mindfulness and negative emotions today. Jeez, heavy. But first, before we dig in, make sure you head over to theadultchair.com to learn more about the show. Subscribe for free. Sign up to the mailing list. You know what's great about the mailing list is sometimes we send out a mailing list to our mailing list subscribers, and they get early access to the podcast. What do you think about that, people? It's a great opportunity to get ahead on everybody else. Or you can find us, of course, in iTunes or any place fine podcasts are served. You can join the conversation on Facebook or Twitter. We would love to hear from you. And now, all right. So we've talked about mindfulness before a little bit. Let's talk about how do you want to approach a conversation around mindfulness and negative emotions?
Well, it's really interesting because the whole podcast is called, of course, The Adult Chair. And when we are in our adult chair is when we are mindful. So this kind of links together again when we talk about the chairs. But I really want to start out by talking about negative emotion. And we have negative emotions. We have positive emotions. We have all kinds of emotions. In fact, we're born with emotions. Like we just come in with them. It's like when you buy something like a new clock from Target and it comes with the batteries. Mm-hmm. It's like the batteries that we come in with them. So when people come in and say, I need you to help me to get rid of my sadness, of my grief, of my something, I can't get rid, I used to think we could. We cannot get rid of negative emotions.
This is inside out.
Yeah,
this is the lesson of inside out. These things have to exist to coexist. That's what we're striving to achieve.
Exactly. And by the way, the other thing that people might disagree with me on is that I don't believe we can heal a negative emotion.
Because a negative emotion is just a thing. It just is a thing that exists. It's like healing gravity.
Right, exactly. So if you think about like if you break your arm, your bone is broken and then it heals, therefore it's not broken, right? Mm-hmm. So if I have, let's say, some deep sadness, it's not like, again, that I can take the sadness away and then it never comes back. It's going to come back. That's the difference. It's not like I keep breaking my arm.
Yeah. Well, to extend the metaphor a little bit, it's not like a broken arm can be healed. It cannot be unbroken.
Right.
Right. There will always be, you can put on the X-ray, you will always find the reminiscent signs of breaking.
Oh, that's interesting.
What do you think about that? It's like I've been listening to you for the last 2 years.
I hope so. What do I do with these negative emotions? The first thing that we want to do is to become present, because we can't deal with these negative emotions if we're sitting in the past or we're sitting in the future. So we need to get mindful in the moment. We can do that by sitting down, taking some deep breaths very slowly, and just bringing our awareness back into the moment. We can use things like videos or meditations. Go to YouTube. I've got a few of them on my site, or go find them somewhere, where it's just about becoming more present with ourselves. What we have learned to do is to go outside of ourselves to numb out these negative emotions instead of going inside. So when we are mindful, We're simply stepping into the moment. We are becoming aware of what's in the moment, which is this negative emotion, which is the sadness. So we want to turn toward the emotion instead of away from it and get curious. So if I'm sad, let's say, and I've got some sadness in my body, so I'm going to sit or I might feel sad, or I'm going to feel it in the body and just kind of do a scan from head to toe as if I'm sliding myself into one of those CAT scan machines or the MRI machines. It's like, okay, where is the sadness? Oh, wow, it's in my stomach. Wow, it's in my chest. Okay, now what? Let's breathe. Let's just get really curious about it. And when I'm in, again, my adult chair, or when I'm in this mindful place, I'm able to step away from it and observe it. So what we become aware of is that it's just a part of me that's really sad or that's in grief. It's not all of me, even though it feels like it is. If I'm really sad and a puppy runs up to me, I'll go, oh my God, look how cute. And I suddenly shift into this other state, correct?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Therefore, if all of me were sad, even if a puppy ran up or something else ran up to me, I would just not be able to shake off the sadness.
Right.
So there's a part of me that wants to be known. So we want to get to know that part. We can ask that part of us. I've done this in the past. It's really powerful to say, okay, so I'm really sad. I want to know my sadness. What if I ask my sadness to sit in the chair next to me and we talk to it?
What are the kinds of things you say to your sadness?
First of all, if I'm just sitting with my eyes closed, and I might just say something like, hey, if I'm sad, I want to know you. I want to know this part of me that's sad. It clearly wants my attention. What do I need to know about this sadness? So I'll put it in the chair next to me, and I'm going to get a visual maybe of what does it look like. When I've done this in the past, sometimes I see this part of me that's crying, or this part of me that looks like, I remember one time I did one where I was really angry and it looked like the Tasmanian devil from Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
He was sitting next to me. But I mean, it could be male, it could be female, it could be a little monster person, it could be anything, but it wants our attention. So we want to get to know it. So put that part of you in the chair next to you or on the couch and just get curious. Ask it questions like, hey, I want to know you. What do I need to know about this sadness? And as we're doing that, we're slowly breathing and allowing that emotion to start moving through us. Again, what happens is when we have these emotions, the brain tells us, if I feel this emotion, I'm going to die. So don't feel the emotion. So that's when people say, I'm stuck in fill in the blank. I'm stuck in my grief. I'm stuck in my sadness. I'm stuck in my anger. The brain doesn't let us feel, but yet the emotion is already moving up through us, so it gets stuck in the body.
So it seems like what we're looking for is a degree of sort of resilience or elasticity, being able to move in and out with some flexibility between these states of emotion. Does that mean anything?
What we want to do is allow the emotion to move through us. And if we can remember that all emotions are temporary, even the positive ones. So even when we're happy, you might be happy for, a day or an hour, and then something happens in the next hour you're not, and something else happens and you're happy again. All emotions are meant to move through us, and they're all different. We have a spectrum, remember, from love to fear and everything in between. Sometimes I feel like I'm not worthy. Sometimes I feel like a fraud. Sometimes I feel happy and I'm joyful, but it's like churning through us. So instead of stopping them, when we're mindful, we move into the emotion, we get curious about it, we become the observer of it, we breathe, and we let it come through us. Unfortunately, of course, our parents, they didn't know what to do, and their parents didn't know what to do, and we just get handed down ways of dealing with emotions from our parents and their parents and their parents. And most of it is very dysfunctional and covers up our emotions.
Yeah, I was just going to say, they stifle it. Like it's stuck down and, put away. And the lesson that we learn is it's just better if it's uncomfortable. Just don't talk about it.
Exactly. I mean, if you think about it, if everyone that is listening to this, what did you hear or see or experience when you were growing up, when you were having a negative emotion? What was the response that you got, or the reaction even? Many people hear things like their parents might have said, brush it off, it's fine. Or we always hear things like, oh, things will get better, don't worry, you're fine. let it go. But yet we're not validated for what's going on in our body. And we're just trying to, again, push it down somewhere.
Right. We end up living in a state of half-truths. And the
Right.
part of that truth is, I mean, at some point it will get better because we naturally will move through into some other state of emotion. But that doesn't actually address a more subversive kind of feeling that we're dealing with.
No, in fact, you see it, I mean, with children, if you see a toddler in a restaurant and they start screaming, what does the parent do? Here, do you want this cookie?
Yeah.
So the kid's having some kind of emotion, and then we're being offered cookies. And even when we're older, same thing. Here, let's just go have an ice cream cone.
Right, I remember. Cookies
what
taste good with pain.
Of course. So what gets programmed in, though, is, if I'm feeling a negative emotion, I'd better then reach for something sweet, or a piece of pizza, or something to shove it down, because the brain remembers. The brain's recording everything. So the brain remembers negative emotion. To shove this down, I need fill in the blank. So I need a cookie. Sugar. Sugar takes away my negative emotions, and it becomes very unconscious and reactionary then when we're adults.
So how do you go about uncovering what that sort of salve is for people? Because that's a very unconscious thing, right? Or a subconscious thing, I guess I'm saying. Like at some point, like I am not aware that I'm doing these things to as an accommodation for my emotion, and as an adult. And I think what's interesting that I'm noticing about like the generation older than me, it feels like they are coming to this awareness of how to handle emotions so much later in life than would have been useful for their children. Right. Like when I needed this help was when I was 3, and now I'm in my 40s and trying to figure this out. But parents are still coming to this awareness, and they're in their 60s and don't know how to do this. So how do you uncover what those behaviors are and help people to move into the adult chair to be aware that these are just like fake accommodations for pain?
We become mindful. We become mindful. This is what it's all about. So we don't have to have, 3 glasses of wine in the evening or pop a Xanax or anything like that. When we can become mindful and slow things down and step inside of us instead of looking outside of us is when we start making the changes in the brain. So when we feel a negative emotion, the idea is to slow down and look inside and become curious about what this emotion is all about. Okay. Not go outside to numb it out. But we're moving so fast. Again, remember, we're living in the future and the past all the time in that adolescent chair. We're living from that egoic place that says, fix it. And, when we go and talk to our spouse, and what does the spouse want to do? And we go up there and say, I had a really bad day at work. They look at us and want to fix it. And let me tell you, the way to step deeper inside, if we're talking to a friend or a spouse or anybody, is to have that other person just listen to what we're going through and allow the emotion to come up and through. Oftentimes, I think I've said this in the past on another podcast with my husband, I can feel an emotion kind of stirring around inside of me. And I'm like, oh God, there it is. I'd like to know what this is. For me, I'll tell my husband, sit down. I'm going to say a few things about how I'm feeling. And then as I do that, some tears may come. I might be angry or whatever the emotion is. I don't know. And I just say to him, please just sit and listen. Don't even say a word. I just need to be heard. And in speaking about it, oftentimes it lets the emotion come up and through us. Sometimes it's just a good cry that we have and that we may need. So whatever it is, and for other times, it just might be talking about it, and that would be helpful. Other times, it's sitting with it. If I'm alone, sometimes I just need a good walk, and I will go for a walk, and I'll be all by myself, no headphones on, and I'm walking. And again, I can pop that part of me out, and I'll just say, okay, this part of me is so angry. I want it to walk next to me, and I want to have a conversation with it. So what am I angry about? I want to learn more about it. Where'd the anger come from? What do I need to know about it? What do you need from me? What do you need from me, Michelle? Anger.
Right.
I want to help you. And then again, from that adult chair, another question we may ask is, and then at the end of all of the feeling and bringing it up through you, we might say something like, now what's true? What's true in this moment? So let's just pretend like I'm really sad about, losing a job or losing a loved one. after we've sat in this emotion, and that's not, I'm not trying to make light of that. That's a tough one, of course, when somebody dies, that's of course, but, and we want to allow the sadness to come up and through us, and the grief, it's going to come up and through and up and through and up and through, but then we're going to have moments where we're not. But if we're stuck in it, we want to ask ourselves questions like, so what's true about my sadness or my grief? Well, what's true is I really miss fill in the blank. I really miss him. My life is forever changed. That's true too. I feel like I can't go on. Okay, that's a feeling you're having in this moment. So we want to be really gentle with ourselves when we're having these emotions. But when we ask ourselves what's true about what we're feeling, it's sort of like it loosens it. It softens it, and it helps us to get unstuck just by getting curious about what we're feeling when we feel stuck.
One of the things that when we had started talking about doing this podcast, the original focus was going to be on the idea or the sort of space, the experience of loneliness. And that space of loneliness in your prep for this show evolved into this negative emotions discussion. Can you just reflect a little bit on how you got here from loneliness? That's something I'm really interested in. I know a lot of people feel both sort of practically and emotionally lonely. What's your experience with that?
So with lonely, moving to Nashville and having all of, I'm originally from Rochester, New York, and then all my family moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and all of them, like 40 of them, including my husband's family, we all lived within a few miles of each other there. So moving to Nashville, not knowing a soul, was really hard for me. And I'm, I have this Italian background and we're all very close and tight and together and we're there for each other. And all my, my closest friends were all there too. So leaving that, coming here, not knowing anybody was very lonely for me. And I had a really hard time in the beginning when I lived here. And I really tried to fix it in the beginning, and I was angry and I would judge other people because I'm like, well, it's their fault. They're not accepting me.
Right.
You know? Yeah. And I was angry and I was hurt. The thing is, I was trying to cover up my lonely. So I finally had to sit with it. Not had to, but I decided and chose to sit in my own feeling of lonely. And it just, I can actually remember the day I did it. It was a few years ago and I sat in it. And I mean, every day not every day, probably every week though, my poor family, because I'd say, when can we move back? I want to move back. I don't like it here. I don't have friends, I'd wear my family out. It was not pretty, And then finally I just sat in it. I truly did. And I sat in it and I'm like, I am so lonely. I'm like, yeah, I really am. And it was like, I had a conversation with that part of me that was so sad and lonely. And I validated all of my loneliness and all of my sadness. I remember saying, yeah, it is hard being away from my family. I'm very, very close to my whole family. I have great friends that feel like family there. And I validated it. And then I remember sitting on the couch and I was breathing and breathing. And I said, okay, I might have had a few little tears. And then I was like, but what else is true? And I remember that was when everything started to shift for me. I was like, oh, well, my family's really happy here. And I did miss out on a lot of growing up, or my children growing up with my family and my husband's family. And I started listing all the things, but I do have a really great private practice here. I had to, because even moving here, I had to start that up from scratch. I mean, I lost everything when I moved here. It was really hard and I was in a lot of grief. But I sat in it. I remember feeling it. It was like, I almost, coddled my loneliness. Like, again, our feelings come from the child part of us. So it was this little Michelle, no more than 6, that just felt like a little lost puppy. And then I started listing the friendships that I have here. And wow, like they're great friendships that I have here. And again, the business that I built from nothing and that I've built into this great business here now. And having you, Pete, as my podcast, and I built gratitude into my daily practice and everything started to change. And let me tell you something. It's not that loneliness does not come up for me, but it doesn't enter my mind every single day. Mm-hmm. Am I triggered a little bit? Like when my family was here over the weekend, they're talking about.
That's why I bring this up. Like that has to have been, present on your mind.
But I have to say, I mean, if it were 3 years ago, it would have like collapsed me.
Right.
and I didn't.
Devastating, yeah.
It really was. Like it would have been. But, they were here. And here's the powerful, powerful word. Again, we can only get this from our adult chair and in a mindfulness practice is this was the turning point of where I was on the couch probably about 3 years ago. I accepted it.
Yeah.
Acceptance of this loneliness feeling and not needing to change a thing and just saying, I am lonely and that's okay. And I accept that I'm lonely and I accept that I'm living here away from my family. And I know, like, as I say this, it's very mental, but having a full body experience of acceptance changed me.
And that moves again back to this level, this sort of space of mindfulness and awareness and moving through that negative emotion of loneliness. Because
I think when I moved here and I realized it wasn't anything like Charlotte for me and all my friends and family, I sat in this longing place. I was longing all the time for, if I could just go back. If we could just move back, then everything would be so much better. And then my kids would have this and I would have this and and I just got to this place of, I'm just going to accept where I am right now. And I don't have to like it. And all of a sudden I got into that place. And then I could like rise up a little bit from, like, it was like I rose up out of the ashes a little bit. And I said, well, is it so bad here? I'm like, no, I mean, would I prefer to live nearby my family? Yes. Here's what was an interesting twist. This was when I sat, after I accepted it, I started asking myself, so what is true? What is true about Nashville? I was like, honestly, I like Nashville better than Charlotte, but don't tell anybody. Like, I like it's a really cool place to live. Now, it doesn't have water nearby, and I don't like that. I'm a huge water person, but Nashville's really cool.
Don't you have a river?
I don't want to live on a river.
Isn't there like a river downtown or something in Nashville? Or
but
that's something.
I don't want to. No, it's not
you go
like
splash around in the river.
In Charlotte, growing up in Rochester, we spent the summers on a lake.
Yeah.
And in Charlotte, I lived on a lake. I'm a lake person, and I love the ocean too. So I want to have it in my backyard, and I don't want to be on a river. I want to drive.
You should come to Portland. We got water coming out to Yin Yang.
I know. I will be out of, I have to say probably in 3 years when my younger son graduates, I'll be out of here. But because I really need, it's almost like I need water. It's just part of who I am. I just love the water. But anyway, I really sat with, well, what's true about Nashville after I sat in accepting it, that I'm here and I'm not with them. And it was like I could let go of all the stories because, man, my mind and my adolescent chair and my ego had all kinds of stories of how much better my life would be if I was in Charlotte. And that's why I was stuck and lonely. So that's another thing is we want to sit and listen to the stories that we're telling ourselves. And, if I was there, yada, 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 yada. And you know what? Who the heck knows if that's true? But man, our mind can go on a wild, it create some amazing stories. Amazing stories about your life, Michelle, would be better if you would fill in the blank.
Yeah.
In my story, I was like stuck in play and then instant replay of my life would just be that much more amazing if I could move back to Charlotte closer to my friends and family.
When the truth of that is you can't go home again. You would have been more frustrated with yourself for giving up. I guarantee it. Well,
and the other truth is that, is it possible to find happiness here? And isn't happiness, as they say, an inside job?
Yeah.
And would my family be like the cherry on the sundae? Absolutely, yes. But I can have the sundae here too. It's what am I sorting for in my vision? What am I looking for? Am I stuck in a story or am I sitting in the moment in a very mindful place going, but what do I have right here, right now? Well, let's see. And this is why gratitude, again, is so important. Another thing we can do only in the moment. It's like, well, I have my health and I have a healthy family and my kids are healthy. And I have my practice. I love what I do. So, and now I've got this podcast with me. You're in my gratitude team every day. You are. And I'm like, I love what I do. And what I do is actually trickles into my life. It's not like I'm an accountant and I leave at 5:00. How I live my life is very much what I do in my workplace. And even with you on this podcast, so I get to live what I do. How great is that? Oh, so anyway, but yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up about that, about that because loneliness, I lived in it and I was stuck in a broken record. I mean, it was a broken story that was in my head and it wouldn't release until I became mindful and I sat down and explored more about my loneliness. And when I landed in accepting the fact that yes, I can be lonely, but here's the thing too. This is kind of crazy, but we can be lonely and accept that I'm here. So I can hold two opposite emotions at the same time.
Oh, yes.
So I can still be lonely, but I can also be really joyful too, because I have a great practice here and I love Nashville.
Yeah.
And then this is a little Kabbalah for you, but we have two opposite extremes. And then the third one presents itself. And what's that? So I certainly did a lot of that work too, but just getting really curious about what our emotions are, whatever they are, sitting in them, sitting with them. And I've read this many times on mindfulness practices. Invite that emotion to tea and sit down with it and get to know it. And breathing moves emotions. And again, when we breathe, we move emotion. We put ourselves in that parasympathetic nervous system. So what do you know? That gets us more mindful. That pushes the emotion through us. I mean, it's just breath moves emotion. It moves energy. So it's moving the emotion through us. So, and we can only do all this in the moment, So this is why mindfulness, oh my gosh, it's just so important that we bring ourselves back to the moment. That's where all the magic happens. That's where all the change happens. Yeah. And also going down deep inside and not looking outside of ourselves like we're trained to do. I had a lovely client the other day, this girl, and she had she's in her early 20s, I think, and she had broken up with her fiance. And I said, so, how are you, what's going on with this? Tell me more about this. And she'd said, well, I'm just so upset I can't get out of the sadness. So of course I'm mentioning and offering her to sit in that sadness. And we were talking about her parents, and her mom had said, if you could just have a few glasses of wine, you'll be fine. I said, no. No.
Oh dear.
And this girl, I said, no. And again, I said, what if we sit in it? Which sounds so crazy, but it's okay. Like, let's sit in that sadness. It's wanting your attention. Let's see what else it has to say. Where is it in the body? In fact, Pete, I'm going to put a mindfulness meditation on my site to help people to move emotions through them. It's going to be a guided visualization to help people do this.
Oh, I love it. And then maybe next week you can do a guided discussion on when it is appropriate to drink wine and how this is not it. There are all kinds of great reasons to drink wine. Yes. This is not it.
No. Of course, we all do. Even I do every once in a while, for sure. But
well, this is great stuff, Michelle. And that meditation will be there. I'll push that out in the podcast feed, so you'll listen to this, and then the next thing that you hear in the podcast, it should be this meditation from Michelle. But you can find that on the website, and we'll put it up on YouTube as well. So if you like to do these meditations, which with a beautiful big screen imagery, we'll certainly have that for you as well. So excellent. Great stuff, Michelle. Thank you.
Yeah, this is good. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah. So for everybody, thank you so much. And I realized in my opening that I forgot to mention one thing. For Android users, I have a very special technical note. This very morning, they announced that the podcasts are available in Google Play. So if you are a Google Play listener, not an Apple Podcast listener, finally, Google has a podcast directory. They say support will be running out slowly, but we are there. We are a launch partner, so you can search for The Adult Chair and find us in Google Play Store. So thank you to all platform users. We sure appreciate you. So that's it. On behalf of Michelle Chalfant, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next time right here in The Adult Chair.